Welcome to the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Florida Atlantic Owls, who finished 4-8 last season. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 13th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the FAU Athletics Beat Reporter. He is a contributing writer for Bleacher Brothers and FAU Owl Nest. He is the play-by-play announcer for the South Florida Collegiate Baseball League. He is Robbie Lastella. Robbie can be found at FAU_Owls_Nest on X. Welcome to the show, Robbie.
Guys, thank you for having me on. I love the introduction. I love the FAU B-roll going on with the fight song. I'm ready to go. I'm ready for football season right about now.
So how would you describe this offense for someone that's never seen the Owls play?
Yeah, I would definitely describe it as a pro-style offense. It draws both from Tom Herman's experience at Houston and Texas, and both Charlie Fry's pro experience and at Central Michigan. There's a play-action shotgun centric to it, shotgun being its main formation, and the play-action set up a lot off of the run game, which draws a lot from Tom Herman's experience. The run game is used in the beginning of drives to kind of set up play action, open up the field for tight ends a little bit. Play action, get the tight ends going over the middle, especially in the red zone. Set up the run game early in the drives, and then you get down to the red zone. Teams think you're going to hand it off to your back, play action, then all of a sudden your tight ends open over the middle. And the same thing with that play action. Use it to kind of. You need a quarterback in that offense that's mobile, but it doesn't have to be a Kyler Murray type quarterback. It can be somebody who's just got enough mobility to kind of move around in the pocket, and if it collapses, to kind of push forward a little bit, gain 6-7 yards on the ground. Daniel Richardson was good at that last season. Wasn't the most mobile quarterback by any stretch, but was still able to hold his own in the pocket and run with it when they needed to. And in terms of the wide receivers, you see them active, both stretching the field, screens, pick and pops, drag routes, any kind of way to kind of get wide receivers open in space, they'll go for it. But yeah, it's a very diverse offense, and one that benefits players that play in it because there's a variety of different ways they can use guys. Tight ends being very, very centric in this offense and used more, in my opinion, than most teams in college football. They use them both to stretch the field, in the red zone, blocking, and they use all of them. So it's a very diverse offense and one that's good at helping players be known as they're trying to get to the next level.
Well, let's get into the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Last season, Casey Thompson was their starter, but his season came to an end when he tore his ACL and MCL in their game against Clemson. Daniel Richardson would come on and start the rest of the season for the Owls. Well, both have transferred out of FAU, and Cam Fancher from Marshall transferred in. Then their rushing threat quarterback, Michael Johnson Jr., transferred to Syracuse after the spring. Whose job is it? Is it Fancher's, who comes in here from Marshall? Is there anybody else that we need to know about in this room?
Well, from the looks of it off the spring practices, spring games, some summer workouts, I personally believe that there's a little bit of a quarterback battle brewing between Fancher and Tyreek Starks, who returning from last year, a redshirt junior, both of them, Fancher and Starks. Cam obviously coming from Marshall, and Ty Starks, he spent a year at Independence Community College from Last Chance U, if you guys remember that show. But Ty is a guy who spent last season with the Owls, was kind of the third string to start the season behind Casey, Daniel Richardson, and then it was him. And then after Casey went down, he became the backup, and he saw playing time at times, especially extended playing action in the final game of the season versus Rice. And what I've seen from Ty Starks recently is a big jump in his game, both in terms of what I really liked, what I saw in the offseason was he put on a ton of muscle. I mean, his arm looked like it doubled the size from last year, and I think that's helped him. He looked like he had a little more zip on the ball. He looked very confident in the pocket in his reps both in practice and in the spring game itself. Still, accuracy is a little bit of an issue, but he's developing consistently every single day. And he's got that, like I mentioned in the terms of the offense, he's not going to be a guy who runs the read option offense every play, but he's got the ability to stand in the pocket. But if the pocket's collapsing or nothing's available downfield, he can take it off and run with it. Well, he's got that mobility, probably a little bit less mobile than Cam. But I think where Ty has an advantage on Cam is that he puts zip on the ball. And Cam's had accuracy issues in his own right at Marshall. And so, both are very talented quarterbacks, and that is a really good problem to have if you're FAU. Cam comes in with obviously success at the D1 level and experience that Tyreek Starks doesn't have. So I think that's an advantage in Cam's department, and the fact that it's a little bit weird of an advantage, but FAU brought in a really good right tackle, Daughtry Richardson, this season, and he's a native right tackle. So if they were to try to put him over to the left side, that's not his biggest strength. I'm sure he could play both positions, but if Cam were to win the starting job, all of a sudden the best offensive lineman FSU transfer becomes his blindside protection, and sacks and pocket protection was a little bit of an issue last season for the Owls. So that's another thing, that could possibly favor Cam. But you asked if the job is decided. I don't think it is. I think that Tom Herman's a guy that he mentioned in his opening press conference about working with his guys, vouching for his guys, and promoting from within is something we've seen, at least with his staff. He rather than kind of rebuild the staff every year, he likes to promote within. And I think that's something to keep in mind with this team as well. Guys that have come back, there's been transfers as well. And a lot of that is, Tom Herman wanting to get his guys in there and work with guys that he recruited. And if they're still here a year later, I personally think he's a big believer in them, and I think that promoting from within is a big part of his culture. So it's something to watch for with Ty Starks, and it's a possible option for the Owls to, if they don't have a surefire winner by week 1 of the quarterback position. It's obviously not the most traditional thing, but they could definitely build a package for who's ever the technical second string quarterback. We saw Michael Johnson play pivotal roles last year. Now, I don't think Cam or Ty Starks are the running type of quarterback that Michael Johnson was in that system. But I think there is the ability to create a package for them, and it'll be interesting to see what develops once camp season begins and more practices are underway, and see if somebody kind of separates themselves a little bit, because it's right now. I mean, there's nothing that has said, okay, Cam is QB1 for sure and Ty is QB2 for sure. They're kind of taking even reps. They both in the spring game were taking snaps with either squad. FAU didn't do kind of an A team or a B team spring scrimmage. They split the squads up pretty evenly, I would say, and they had the quarterbacks rotate in between each squad. So both Ty, Cam, Carson Krueger, Kason Wiseman wasn't with the team at the time, but those three definitely got, I wouldn't say Carson got even reps, but Ty and Cam definitely got even reps with both sides. So we'll see how everything develops, but I think Ty is definitely giving Cam Fancher a run for his money, but Cam's coming in here with a chip on his shoulder as well. Things didn't end probably the best way they wanted at Marshall. So I think that it'll be interesting to see for sure if anyone's able to separate themselves, but I don't know if anyone will be able to separate themselves, and that's not really the biggest problem in the world. FAU would have loved to have two quarterbacks this past season that were able to take the reins. So we'll see how everything shakes out. But very talented quarterback room as well. And we didn't even mention the guys who probably aren't starting, with Case and Wiseman coming over from Colorado, Carson Kruger being a talented redshirt freshman, Jaden George coming over from Alabama. It's like fifth school. But there's different minds in that quarterback room, veterans, young guys, people that have been around different programs. And I think that will benefit them and kind of help them be a really collective unit with a really top heavy too in Cam Fancher and Ty Starks.
Moving on to the running game, the Owls lost over 1,000 rushing yards between Larry McCammon and Kobe Lewis, both who have graduated. The room does return Zuberi Mobley, Kevon Walker, and Xavier Terrell. They also bring in C.J. Campbell Jr. from Florida State. The group is somewhat young, but how did the group look in the spring? How do you think it's going to shape up here in 2024?
Well, the room as a whole looked pretty solid, if I do say so. C.J. Campbell, made his name known in the spring game for sure. Started out the day with a 75-yard tote to the house in that one, and for Owls fans, that was kind of wow, okay, we gotta, because they both lose. You lose Larry McCammon, you lose Kobe Lewis, and those are your two leading rushers. So you're like, who's gonna fill that position? Well, you bring in C.J. Campbell from FSU. You've got two really solid returning backs, honestly, in Xavier Terrell and Zoo Mobley, and a redshirt freshman as well, in Jamari Sands. I think is another kind of slept on back. He's from the area. And he's a guy that here in year two might see some carries, and he's got some kind of explosive speed to him. So he could be a guy that you see gets a carry and kind of takes one to the house, and then all of a sudden he's getting more carries. And so with the offensive scheme, Charlie Fry and Tom Herman are running, it benefits them to have three running backs that can all carry the ball. That's what they kind of tried to implement this last season, with Larry being kind of the feature guy, but then also having Terrell and Zoo and Kobe Lewis behind him as well, and kind of utilizing them so if they're not wearing boots by Tuesday of the following week. Because running backs are a very, very tough position. You get hurt, you can be injury prone, you can't be injury prone, but injuries happen. And so to have depth at that position and allow the Owls to kind of give guys breaks and use them to kind of set up the offense, like I kind of was trying to say back in the beginning. The way they set up the offense is by kind of getting 3-4 yards on that first down carry, no huddle, kind of get quick into it, and then set up a short screen to a wide receiver, tight end, gain 3 quick more yards. Owls are the best when they can kind of rotate players in and out, move quick on the fly. That's when that offense is really successful. And so there's depth in that running back room, which I think will really kind of benefit them going into this season, because injuries happen and you still want to be able to kind of run your game plan. And when you're onto your third string running back and don't have anyone behind him because those guys got hurt too, all of a sudden you can't run every first down because your running back needs a break. And so it'll really benefit the Owls to have the depth that they have in this room this season. And they have some veteran leadership in there as well, along with the young guys.
How do you think the room shakes out, between the three guys? If you think it's going to be a three-headed monster, so to speak, is there going to be one kind of guy maybe featured more? This guy's going to be the change of pace back. This guy's going to be the goal line back. How do you see that working out?
Who's ever healthy? No, I mean, it very well may be who's ever healthy. But at the moment, probably leaning towards C.J. Campbell, just because he's got that. They bring him in here from FSU. They pair him up with Daughtry Richardson on the offensive line. He can kind of know a little bit of familiarity there. And he looked really, really good in that spring game. Obviously, as I mentioned, had that 75-yard tote. But he's a guy that he's looking to kind of prove himself. Never got that chance at FSU. And I personally don't believe he would have came to FAU if he didn't have a chance at playing time. So I think he's really got a kind of a little bit of a leg up to try to get that starting job, just because of the experience and then I don't want to give the P5 transfer to, because talent can come from anywhere. But the fact you do bring in 2 FSU guys, there's familiarity with that. They've played at a championship level, been a part of a championship level. And so I think that kind of comes in here, and he's that leader in that running back room. But it doesn't take anything away from Zoo Mobley, Xavier Terrell, who can come in and still probably carry the ball 6 to 8 to 10 times per game behind him, maybe might be a little bit a lot, and still provide relief and still put up numbers as well. So probably CJ Campbell for sure, but I think the depth will be utilized for sure to kind of help this offense stay healthy throughout the season.
When so that first carry against Michigan State, is that CJ Campbell or you think someone else?
I think it'll be CJ Campbell, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see them in a 2 running back set with Zoo and CJ both out there. And who knows, maybe they do a play action, fake it to Zoo, roll out to the right, and then do a little pop screen to CJ. I don't know. If it's a carry with 1 running back, yeah, it'll probably be CJ. But that's the thing about this offense. They'll surprise you. They'll come out there with 2 running backs and they'll give it to Zoo instead of CJ when you think it'll be CJ. So I'll say CJ, but they could have even carries by the end of the game for sure.
Well, the passing game will look a lot different in 2024. Jaquan Burton is out of eligibility. Tony Johnson transferred to Cincinnati. Devin Price is off to Ole Miss. However, there's no bigger loss to this room than LaJohntay Westard, who was an AAC All-Conference first team, and he's off to Colorado. How did FAU go about replacing these losses?
Well, they did it kind of in abundance. In last season, in the wide receiver room, you kind of saw all of the targets going to LaJohntay Westard, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, the guy was one of the best wide receivers in the country, if not the best. So, you lose him and you lose all of those targets that he was able to haul in for the most part. I mean, he was catching. They weren't just targeting him; he was catching most of those passes, and so that eliminates a huge. Him leaving takes away probably 90% of the offense, and so they decided rather than bringing in another guy who can replicate those 90 receptions, or what I'm blanking on the exact statistics, but the big numbers he had. And they bring in a lot of different guys. They bring in Milan Tucker. They bring in Caleb Coombs. They bring in Joe Young from the JUCO level. They bring in Dom Henry, if I didn't say his name already. They bring in, point being, they bring in Marlon Johnson from Buffalo. They bring in 4, 5, 6 names here to kind of try to fill the room. And instead of what I really envisioning happening with this wide receiver room next season is rather than having a guy who catches 70-80% of the targets, it's going to be a spread, it's sharing the wealth a little bit at that wide receiver room. I mean, they bring in a guy like Marlon Johnson who can pair with BJ Alexander on the outside and be downfield threats. I mean, Marlon's 6'4", I believe, and he's got a huge frame. Owls haven't really had that type of jump ball receiver. Since Jamal Edgerien left, he transferred to Purdue after Willie Taggart left. But with having outside receiving threats now, they bring in Caleb Coombs, as I mentioned. They bring in Milan Tucker. They bring in Dom Henry. A lot of those guys, they can go in the slot. They can play both inside and outside. Omari Hayes being a guy as well that made his name known in the spring game. And Joe Young is another guy who he caught a big pass downfield in the spring game. I think Joe is a guy that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on a little bit, just because there's so many wide receivers in that room that it's like you don't know who is really going to be the number one guy yet. And there's just a lot of talent overall in that room. And so rather than bringing in, like I said, one guy to kind of fill 80%, they bring in 5, 6 guys that can all do different things. And now I feel like you'll see an offense where you kind of have maybe 4 or 5 receivers catching 20, 30 plus balls on the year. And we'll see how it all shakes out. Obviously, on paper, all of these guys have contributed at their past stops. Whether or not all of them are still contributing, we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. But that's another thing. I mean, injuries at the wide receiver position last year, if it had LeJontay Wester gotten hurt, it would have been pretty grim. And so having this depth, both at same thing with the running back position, same thing with the wide receiver position. Sure, maybe you're not going to go out there and have these all 5 of your transfer wide receivers make an impact week 1, but having those wide receivers and having them buy in and be a part of the culture and understanding, okay, yeah, I'm not coming here to be LeJontay Wester. I'm coming here to be myself. And if that role is, I need to step in when so-and-so gets hurt. I need to step in on third downs. I need to step in when they want to go deep. I need to step in when they do a screen. I think that benefits them a lot. And I think it was a very smart way to approach filling the wide receiver room this offseason, rather than trying to go get one guy who can stuff the stat sheet like Wester did. Because let's face it, I mean, there's not many guys out there who are able to stuff the stat sheet like Wester did and be as talented and make those plays every single play. That's a tough ass to fill, especially in the transfer portal. And so I think bringing in guys who are all talented and can do different things and play individual roles will not only help themselves out, but it'll help the offense kind of gel as a whole a little bit, because everyone will feel more involved.
Well, BJ Alexander must be like a grad, an exemption or something. He's back. You got Jayshon Platt. He returns. BJ was the leading returner at wideout that's going to be coming back to this room. He had 10 receptions for 104 yards and 1 touchdown. So that kind of gives our listeners an idea of what's coming back and how much LeJontay Wester kind of meant to this team. But between those two and the transfers, how did this group look in the spring, and what should we make of Omari Hayes' spring game? Because it looked like he got a fair amount of work.
Yeah. With BJ, he's a guy that he got buried in the depth chart behind Burt, behind LeJontay last season. And he's a really talented wide receiver. As you mentioned, he had the 10 catches for 104 last season, but he's another guy he's 6'3". And so, having him on the outside, utilizing him in jump ball scenarios is going to be something I believe the Owls will do this season. I think he's got a potential to start on the outside for the Owls for sure. It's possible that him and Jayshon both start on the outside, and you see Omari Hayes in the slot. That's a possible combination right there. Is that for sure what the combination is going to be? No, but it's very possible that those guys all make impacts, because as you mentioned, Omari, what I liked about Omari Hayes is that he had a connection both with Fancher and Ty Starks in that spring game. And he was able to impact the game in kind of a variety of ways. He stretched the field a little bit, caught passes over the middle, and where he really made his bread and butter in that game, at least, was the screens. He was able to be really shifty, catch behind the line of scrimmage, cut up, and gain first downs on screen passes, which that's a big part of the Owls offense as well. Pick and pops off the play action, kind of confuse the defense a little bit. And I'm personally really high in Omari. I think he's got the potential. It's tough to say who's going to be the number one wide receiver in this room. It'll kind of come down to who becomes the starting quarterback, because each guy is going to have the guys that they're close with and have those connections with. But if it is, if one of those guys happens to have that connection with Omari where it's third down, it's 3rd and 3, they have me in a passing situation, and, Omari's running a slot, or it's Wyatt Sullivan running a curl up the middle, going to throw it to Omari because he trusts him more. And that's just a little bit of an example, but I'm very high on Omari, and I think that he kind of burst on the scene here in the spring, and is really going to be able to possibly make an impact this season for the Owls. You're looking for guys to kind of stand out. Like I said, there's a ton of talent in this room, and a lot of these guys can do different things. And it'll kind of come down to who stands out, who's making a name for themselves in these spring camps, and spring camps over, but summer and leading into fall. So I don't necessarily have somebody who's going to be the number one for you at the moment, just because there's so much talent in this room. I think there's potential for 3, 4, 5 guys to be the number one wide receiver this season. It just depends how things shake out. The offense is still developing, but having too much talent is never a bad thing.
So earlier you kind of explained to us how tight ends are utilized in this offense, and the group of tight ends they return, they're pretty deep and definitely have some game experience. They bring back Zeke Moore, Khalil Brantley, and Wyatt Sullivan. How did that room look this spring, and did anyone, like any single guy, stand out for you? Or
Room looks solid. I'm gonna know. I mean, the tight end position in that game, they were doing what they do, catching third down passes over the middle, solid run blocking, red zone threat. I believe Wyatt Sullivan caught a touchdown in that one. And that's kind of the thing with this Owls tight end room, between Sullivan, between Brantley, I'm missing Elijah Brown, who high school teammates with Cam Fancher. So you talk about connections right there. That's one of them. Having a high school team, and Elijah Brown's an Alabama transfer. So the talent is probably there. Didn't get to play a whole ton last season, but now having his high school quarterback on the squad could put something in his favor. But that's the thing with this Owls unit, is there's so many. The tight end unit, between Sullivan, between Brantley, between all of these guys, they all can kind of contribute. And I think it's like the same thing with the running back room. It's the same thing with the wide receiver and tight end room. There's depth there. And I really do think that depth benefits them, and they're able to kind of, they can put out Wyatt Sullivan here over the middle to try to kind of be a big threat over the middle. They can bring in Khalil Brantley to kind of be another red zone threat. Zeke Moore really came and made a name for himself as a freshman this past season. And to see Tom Herman in year one of his era kind of trust a freshman tight end to be a target in third downs, end zone or red zone type plays. He trusted Zeke Moore a lot, and called his number a lot, and he came through. So in that room, if there's somebody that's kind of number one right now, it's Zeke Moore. But I mentioned all the other guys before him kind of for a reason, just to show you that there's a lot of talent there, and they're all kind of dialed in with each other. You ask them kind of, is it ever hard to try to, train with these guys knowing there's only one starting role, and at any of these positions the answer is always no. Like the whole team is really bought in to kind of working with each other and kind of putting the best foot forward. If that means Khalil is starting, if that means Zeke is starting, doesn't really matter to them as long as they're winning games and getting better each week. So that sounds like a lot of coach speak, but that's really the mentality that they're rocking with. And so same thing as the wide receiver, running back position, tight end, a little bit more of an advantage towards Zeke Moore, but still a ton of depth in that room, and a ton of potential for talent to play this season, both together in one tight end sets. There's a lot they can do with their tight ends.
Well, the offensive line will need to gel together quickly. They lost their left guard Dorian Hinton to Texas A&M, Kamar Bell to South Carolina, and they're starting left tackle. You got Marquise Robinson and right tackle Chaz Neal are both out of eligibility. That means their sole starter coming back for this line is their center. We're going to give this name a whirl. Federico Maranjas. Is that close enough?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so.
All right. And then, what did the staff do to fill those losses?
Well, for starters, they bring in a big offensive tackle pickup. We talked about him, Daughtry Richardson, probably starting right tackle, and the staff is already really high on him. He's a guy that he's a potential NFL prospect with 1 or 2 good seasons here at FAU. With really 1 good season at FAU with how the world's going, Daughtry could be back at the P5 level next year, but hopefully that doesn't happen for Owls fans out there. But Daughtry's a really talented staple for this offensive line piece. Pairing him with Frederico kind of gives them 2 anchors, like right in the middle and right on the edge. And then, the rest of the offensive line, there's still some work to figure out who exactly is going to take over all of the other roles. Jordan Church is a guy who in his second year at the guard position, he's a guy that's put on a ton of muscle in this offseason too, making a name for himself a little bit. Malcolm Lamar, same thing. He's another guy. He's in his grad year, but he'll excuse me, he'll be able to make an impact on the offensive line as well. So, and then another name that I'm high on. I'm personally high on him. He may not crack the depth chart right away. Keon Rowe, a German-born offensive tackle. He is a mammoth of a human being. I believe he's 6'7". I had it wrote down over here. Yeah, 6'7", 300 pounds. Freshman from Frankfurt, Germany. He's a guy, a developmental piece for sure. But if things work out, he trains behind Daughtry a little bit. Having him start opposite Daughtry on that line, I think that's a very dynamic combo. Especially Keon, he didn't even grow up playing football, and he kind of came into it recently. And he's talented. He's got solid footwork for somebody who did not grow up playing football. So both of those guys, they bring in different pieces for sure. It's not, they didn't bring in a left tackle, a left guard, a right guard, and a right tackle. But there's different guys. They play different positions. You mentioned a guy, Jacavian Nonar. He's another guy who can possibly step in and play for the Owls this season. So a lot of offensive line is still definitely a little bit of a question mark, but 2 solid anchor pieces there in Daughtry, Richardson, and Frederico as well. Having those 2 will definitely help this offensive line kind of gel together once they figure out, okay, who's going to be the rest of these, fill in the rest of the line, really.
All right. We've talked a lot about the depth that they have and a lot of possibilities. But this time, I need you to pick a guy to have a breakout type season for the offense here in 2024.
A breakout guy. Give me. I'm going to go wide receiver for sure, and it's a toss up at the moment. Okay. Omari Hayes is it's between for me. It's between Joe Young and Omari Hayes. Both of them have the potential to really kind of pop off for the Owls. Joe being a guy who's worked his way up from the JUCO level. He's got a great mentality to it and a ton of talent as well. Good speed, stretch the field. Both him and Omari can stretch the field and have really good route running, can catch in traffic, can kind of make moves in space. I mean, they check all the boxes, both of them, in terms of what you want out of a potential slot receiver guy. Joe honestly could probably play both inside and outside for the Owls. So I like Omari or Joe Young to potentially kind of pop off for the Owls this season. We shall see. The wide receiver room is still a big question. But if they get put in a position to succeed, I think they're in line for a big season for sure.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.
We'll fight for FAU. We're born in paradise. We'll fight for FAU. You know we're gonna win and it's feeling mighty nice. Cheering our football team down the field.